I feel like I owe an apology to Bob Fioretti.
I think you might.
And Scott, thanks for catching that. I didn't mean to intimate that there's no point in voting because she's already won. Of course there is. I'm the guy that bitches about all y'all voting.
Well,
So
it's
Bob
very
Fioretti,
hard.
Again.
Bob Fioretti running as Republican. Very difficult to win, but
It's very difficult and
not over.
heavily Democratic. It's going to be a tough one. But sure, anything could happen.
It's a worthy discussion to bring Paul Vallas into, and Paul Vallas knows this city better than anybody. Good morning, Mr. Vallas. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Good morning.
Nice to have
Good
you back.
morning.
Eileen O'Neill Burke wins. This feels like a very good development for the city of Chicago.
Well, I think it definitely is. I mean, clearly, Kim Foxx has not seen herself as a prosecutor. I think more as a social worker, and you certainly see it in the statistics. I think when you look at the number of individuals who have been arrested for felonies and not charged, I think it's been 3 times the number of a predecessor. And, of course, with the catch and release, as they call it, or let's call it no bail or pretrial bail program, well over 70% of those individuals who are arrested and charged with felonies are actually released right back into the community. So at the end of the day, we need a prosecutor, and I think that's what the voters decided to do, at least in the Democratic primary. They want a prosecutor.
And so this is good. Now we look forward to November, but one step and we move on to our new state's attorney. Paul Vallas, let me ask you this. The article in the Illinois Policy about the Chicago Teachers Union continuing to use children to advance what's happening here in politics. Let's talk about that a little bit, because the idea is that the kids went to vote for the real estate tax hike, or did they go to learn about this tax hike?
No, clearly the union's become really a political organization. Look, the new machine is Tony Preckwinkle, the Chicago Teachers Union. They clearly pulled out all the stops to get the real estate transaction tax passed. Incidentally, that was resoundingly defeated. So not only did we see a victory in terms of Burke winning the primary, of course, there's still the general election to come, as you pointed out, Mr. Fioretti, and Burke will be going head-to-head. But, also the defeat of the real estate transaction tax, and they were clearly manipulating the kids. I mean, they were taking them to the polls, they were registering them, they were all but telling them who to vote for. And they did the same thing during my election. If you remember, there were stories about...
Oh, sure. Weird stories about it all the time, that kids are being bussed
I didn't bring it up
to
because
vote.
Separate, yeah.
Sure. Kids are being bussed to vote and told who to vote for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the teachers union have really become a political party, and they're just doing all the things that the political parties usually do. They were also the primary funder of the real estate transaction tax referendum. And let me point out that referendum went down. Referendum was resoundingly defeated. So if anyone thought that the Chicago Teachers Union, or for that matter, Preckwinkle, were invulnerable, I mean, you got to believe she pulled out all the stops to defeat Burke. Incidentally, pulling many of the stunts that they pulled against me. Saying that she was anti-choice when she was pro-choice. Saying she was anti-LGBT, so it was the same thing that she wasn't a real Democrat. All those type of things. But them and of course the teachers union taking a beating on the real estate transaction tax. That should really embolden people into really believe. That should convince people that they can make substantive changes if people are willing to get organized and get out to vote.
So the teachers union they're calling it, it was a day of political engagement. But my question is, isn't that against school district rules to take the kids out?
Of course it was.
Of course it was. I know.
Of course, but they really believe that they can operate with impunity right now. And I think that the voters saw what they were doing for what it was, and they responded. Also, I want to point out, and as you know, I did an interview on the real estate transaction tax. It wasn't only their manipulation of the children, turning them into like a political force, so to speak, but also just the misinformation that was put out about that tax. First of all, they called it a mansion tax when 90% of the tax was going to be paid by businesses and renters, because rental property and, of course, businesses, commercial property, were going to pay the bulk of the tax. The sales in excess of $1 million is overwhelmingly that type of property. And then, of course, there was the total mistrust in terms of their commitment that they were going to actually spend it in housing. People became really cynical because between the state and the city alone, they've contributed like $800 million to provide migrant support, most of that money housing, not to mention about $1 billion in health care. And so I think people were justifiably cynical that when he said, well, we need to raise this tax for housing, when they were giving hundreds of millions of migrants money, I think it really raised the question of, do you trust the mayor to spend the money as he claims he's going to spend it?
No, and people don't. The mayor said anybody that voted against it's a Trump supporter. Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're going to play the Trump card, and they're going to play the race card, and they're going to do it over and over and over again until it's like the boy who cried wolf, so to speak. They're constantly going to say that. And I think people are just getting tired of it. It's the same thing with the Chicago Public Schools. Look, it's clear what they're trying to do with the Chicago Public Schools. The article I think you're referring to was their decision to go to what they call needs-based budgeting rather than student-based budgeting. And for your listeners out there, what they want to do is they don't want the money to follow the kids. They want to guarantee that every school, even schools that have lost dramatic enrollment, can continue to have all these extra positions funded. The union's trying to protect their jobs, and they're trying to increase the number of jobs. That's what it's about.
It's financial gerrymandering. It's the gerrymandering is you don't pick the candidates pick you. In the case of what you're talking about is you don't tell us how to spend the money. We spend the money on what we want.
Exactly, and that's a great term. In fact, I think I'm going to.
It's my gift to you.
Okay. That is a great term. But I also want to point out, while they're doing that, they're also lowering standards. They're demonizing testing. Of course, testing is racist. Did you know that? Keeping score is racist. Didn't you know that?
Yeah, I heard.
Racist. Didn't you know that? They're even attacking charter schools, which are public schools that are not mandated to enter into the Chicago Teachers Union contract. And 96% of the kids of the 54,000 students whose families, poor families, overwhelmingly poor families, 87% of them are poor families, who decide to send their kids to charter schools because their neighborhood school is maybe too dangerous or not performing. Well, guess what? 96% of those students are Black and Latino.
Right.
So who's the racist? Think about it. When it comes to the choice and learning standards.
Yeah, well, when it comes down to what's going on with Pastor Brooks and how he doesn't get any support because he is a Republican, and yet they'll stand up and tell you every day how concerned they are about saving black kids' lives who were involved in gang shootings or innocent victims because somebody can't shoot straight. Yep, I'll believe that when you show up for stuff in a non-political way. And you don't, Preckwinkle, you don't, Johnson, you don't, Governor Pritzker, you just don't.
Yeah, and look, people have to realize that the destructive impact the Chicago Teachers Union has had on the student lives, not only academically, but from a public safety standpoint, because since 2019, since they forced the school district to shut schools down for 77 consecutive weeks, there's been a 50% increase in murders of school-age youth, 17 years and younger, 8% of the arrests for murder, 9% of arrests for shootings, 32% arrests for burglaries, robberies, over 50% arrests for carjacking. School-age youth, 17 years and younger, 90% of those students are not in school. So it's had a devastating impact. If you take the dramatic increases in youth crime out of the crime statistics, there really hasn't been a significant increase in crime. So at the end, and so they've done generational damage, and now they want to get paid for that damage, because you've seen articles in the newspaper about the $1 billion in costs that are in their new contract demands. They want more staff. They want more pay, they want less accountability, and they want to protect schools that are half to near empty.
I thought Stacey Davis Gates may have bumped her head when she asked for $50 billion, but nobody gave me a medical test. Listen, Paul Vallas, thank you as always. Where do we see the latest that you have written?
Well, just Google Illinois policy and just click on the research page, and it has all of Illinois policy's articles, and you can click my name in, and all my articles will show up. And if you're an insomniac and you're having difficulties,
That's not true. You'll read it, you'll learn more, you'll be smarter, you'll impress your friends.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide input.
I appreciate you being on.
Thanks, Paul Vallas.